The Arizona Territory, 1873. The unforgiving desert sun beat down as Sarah Bennett stared into the dark eyes of the Apache warrior who now owned her life. Desperation had driven her to steal from his camp, a fatal mistake for most. Yet instead of the swift justice she expected, he offered a bargain that chilled her blood, 30 nights in exchange for her life. His words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. She was no longer her own woman. For 1 month she belonged to him, to Red Wolf, whose reputation among settlers struck fear into the bravest hearts. What Sarah couldn't know was how these 30 nights would reshape her soul, challenging everything she believed about herself and the man who claimed her. Could a sentence meant as punishment become the greatest freedom she'd ever known? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah Bennett had not imagined herself capable of theft. Her hands trembled as she packed the small bundle of possessions that remained after burying Thomas. The fever had taken him quickly, leaving her alone in a territory where women without men were considered little more than burdens or opportunities. The gold that had lured them west had proven as substantial as morning mist. Thomas's cough had started in the mines, worsening until he could barely lift his head from their bedroll in the small tent on the outskirts of Promise Creek. By then, their funds had dwindled to almost nothing. "You have skills, Mrs. Bennett," the town doctor had said after confirming her husband's passing. "Educated women are rare here." His eyes had lingered too long on her figure. "I could use assistance in my practice." Sarah had recognized the proposition beneath his words. It wasn't the first. The schoolmaster had made a similar offer, as had the owner of the general store. Each time the message was clear: protection in exchange for her body. She gathered her remaining belongings: Thomas's shirt, her mother's Bible, the faded daguerreotype of her family standing before their Boston home. How far she had fallen from that life of privilege. Her father, the respected merchant, would scarcely recognize his daughter now. Promise Creek offered no promise for a widow with Eastern sensibilities and no connections. The women avoided her, fearing she might set sights on their husbands. The men saw only opportunity in her desperation. 2 days without food clarified her options. Pride would not fill her stomach. The hunting party had departed that morning, leaving their camp lightly guarded. She had watched from the hills, noting where they stored their provisions. Nightfall brought courage born of necessity. Sarah moved silently toward the Apache camp, remembering how Thomas had taught her to step lightly during their hunting excursions before he fell ill. The smell of cooking fires still lingered, though the flames had died to embers. She located the food stores easily enough. Dried meat hung from a rack near the center of camp, too exposed. Instead, she crept toward the water skins hanging from a nearby tree. One would sustain her until she reached the next settlement. Her fingers had just closed around the leather container when a grip like iron clamped around her wrist. Sarah gasped, turning to face her captor. The brave's expression remained impassive as he called out in his native tongue. Within moments, she was surrounded. Women emerged from dwellings. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, and warriors formed a circle around her. Fear closed her throat as they brought her before a tall figure whose bearing spoke of authority. Red Wolf studied the white woman, her blue eyes wide with terror. He had watched her for days, this woman who buried her man and then wandered the hills alone. The settlers called his people savages, yet they would leave one of their women to starve. "You steal from Apache," he said in English, watching surprise register on her face. "I was hungry," she managed, lifting her chin slightly despite her fear. Something in her defiance stirred his interest. Most white women captured by his people wept or begged. This one stood straight, facing death with dignity if not calm. "Stealing from Apache means death," he said flatly, watching the color drain from her face. "Then making a decision that would change both their lives irrevocably unless payment is made." "I have nothing to give you," she whispered. Red Wolf's gaze traveled over her, not with lust but with calculation. 30 nights, he said finally. "You belong to Red Wolf for 30 nights. Then your debt is paid." The meaning of his words hung in the night air between them, heavier than the stolen waterskin that now lay forgotten on the ground. Dawn broke over the mountains as Sarah was led through the Apache camp. Women paused in their morning tasks to stare. Children pointed and whispered. The warriors' faces remained impassive, but their eyes followed her progress with varying degrees of curiosity and disdain. Red Wolf walked ahead, his broad shoulders straight, steps confident. He had not bound her wrists. There was no need. Miles of unforgiving desert stretched in all directions, promising a slow death to anyone foolish enough to flee. They stopped before a dwelling larger than the others. A woman emerged, elderly but straight-backed, with eyes sharp as flint. She assessed Sarah with unconcealed disapproval before speaking rapidly to Red Wolf in their language. His response was brief but final. The old woman's mouth tightened, but she stepped aside. "My grandmother," Red Wolf explained, motioning for Sarah to enter. "She says white women bring trouble." The interior was surprisingly cool and orderly. Woven mats covered the packed earth floor. Cooking implements hung from support poles. Furs and blankets were stacked neatly against one wall. "You sleep there," he indicated a space separated from the main area by a hanging hide. "You work with women during day. You learn our ways," Sarah found her voice. "And at night?" Red Wolf's expression didn't change. "You are mine for 30 nights. My people will respect this." From a cedar chest, he withdrew a blanket of intricate design, deep reds and blacks woven in patterns unlike any Sarah had seen. He placed it around her shoulders, his fingers brushing her collarbone. She suppressed a shiver. "This marks you as mine," he said. "No one will harm you while you wear it." The old woman returned with a clay bowl of stew. She thrust it at Sarah without meeting her eyes, then spoke again to Red Wolf before departing. "What did she say?" Sarah asked, clutching the blanket around herself. "She says I should have killed you." His voice held no emotion. "It would be simpler," Sarah raised her chin. "And why didn't you?" For the first time, something like amusement flickered in his dark eyes. "Perhaps I prefer complicated." He moved toward the entrance. "Eat, rest. At midday you begin work." Left alone, Sarah sank to the floor, the bowl trembling in her hands. The stew smelled of unfamiliar spices, yet her stomach cramped with hunger. She ate slowly, trying to make sense of her situation. The women set her to grinding corn that afternoon. They spoke around her, not to her, in their flowing language. One younger than the rest, with a small child strapped to her back, occasionally translated curt instructions. "I am Sparrow," she said finally. "You are not first white woman in our camp. Others did not live long. Were they claimed as I was?" Sarah asked, blisters forming on her palms from the stone grinder. Sparrow's expression darkened. "No, they were taken in raids. They fought or tried to run. Always they died." She studied Sarah curiously. "You do not fight or run. Would it change anything if I did?" Sparrow shrugged. "No, but most white women do not understand this." As sunset painted the hills copper and gold, Sarah was summoned back to Red Wolf's dwelling. He sat cross-legged by a small fire, sharpening a knife. He did not look up as she entered, her heart hammered against her ribs. The first night of 30. Would he claim his payment now? She clutched the ceremonial blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Sleep," he said finally, still focused on his blade. "Tomorrow brings more work." Sarah hesitated, confusion mingling with relief. "You don't want—" His eyes met hers, unreadable in the firelight. 30 nights, you are mine. How I claim each night is my choice." He returned to his task. "Tonight I choose sleep." She retreated behind the hanging hide, her thoughts in turmoil. Was this mercy, or merely prolonging her fear? Either way, she had survived the first day. 29 more remained. 4 days into her captivity, Sarah had developed a routine. Rise before dawn. Help the women prepare morning meals. Gather wood, carry water, scrape hides, or grind corn. Keep her head down. Speak little. Each night she returned to Red Wolf's dwelling to find him distant but not cruel. He had yet to touch her. The Arizona Territory, 1873. The unforgiving desert sun beat down as Sarah Bennett stared into the dark eyes of the Apache warrior who now owned her life. Desperation had driven her to steal from his camp, a fatal mistake for most. Yet instead of the swift justice she expected, he offered a bargain that chilled her blood, 30 nights in exchange for her life. His words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. She was no longer her own woman. For 1 month she belonged to him, to Red Wolf, whose reputation among settlers struck fear into the bravest hearts. What Sarah couldn't know was how these 30 nights would reshape her soul, challenging everything she believed about herself and the man who claimed her. Could a sentence meant as punishment become the greatest freedom she'd ever known? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah Bennett had not imagined herself capable of theft. Her hands trembled as she packed the small bundle of possessions that remained after burying Thomas. The fever had taken him quickly, leaving her alone in a territory where women without men were considered little more than burdens or opportunities. The gold that had lured them west had proven as substantial as morning mist. Thomas's cough had started in the mines, worsening until he could barely lift his head from their bedroll in the small tent on the outskirts of Promise Creek. By then, their funds had dwindled to almost nothing. "You have skills, Mrs. Bennett," the town doctor had said after confirming her husband's passing. "Educated women are rare here." His eyes had lingered too long on her figure. "I could use assistance in my practice." Sarah had recognized the proposition beneath his words. It wasn't the first. The schoolmaster had made a similar offer, as had the owner of the general store. Each time the message was clear: protection in exchange for her body. She gathered her remaining belongings: Thomas's shirt, her mother's Bible, the faded daguerreotype of her family standing before their Boston home. How far she had fallen from that life of privilege. Her father, the respected merchant, would scarcely recognize his daughter now. Promise Creek offered no promise for a widow with Eastern sensibilities and no connections. The women avoided her, fearing she might set sights on their husbands. The men saw only opportunity in her desperation. 2 days without food clarified her options. Pride would not fill her stomach. The hunting party had departed that morning, leaving their camp lightly guarded. She had watched from the hills, noting where they stored their provisions. Nightfall brought courage, born of necessity. Sarah moved silently toward the Apache camp, remembering how Thomas had taught her to step lightly during their hunting excursions before he fell ill. The smell of cooking fires still lingered, though the flames had died to embers. She located the food stores easily enough. Dried meat hung from a rack near the center of camp. Too exposed. Instead, she crept toward the water skins hanging from a nearby tree. One would sustain her until she reached the next settlement. Her fingers had just closed around the leather container when a grip like iron clamped around her wrist. Sarah gasped, turning to face her captor. The brave's expression remained impassive as he called out in his native tongue. Within moments, she was surrounded. Women emerged from dwellings, children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, and warriors formed a circle around her. Fear closed her throat as they brought her before a tall figure whose bearing spoke of authority. Red Wolf studied the white woman, her blue eyes wide with terror. He had watched her for days, this woman who buried her man and then wandered the hills alone. The settlers called his people savages, yet they would leave one of their women to starve. "You steal from Apache," he said in English, watching surprise register on her face. I was hungry," she managed, lifting her chin slightly despite her fear. Something in her defiance stirred his interest. Most white women captured by his people wept or begged. This one stood straight, facing death with dignity if not calm. "Stealing from Apache means death," he said flatly, watching the color drain from her face. then making a decision that would change both their lives irrevocably, unless payment is made. "I have nothing to give you," she whispered. Red Wolf's gaze traveled over her, not with lust but with calculation. 30 nights, he said finally. "You belong to Red Wolf for 30 nights. Then your debt is paid." The meaning of his words hung in the night air between them, heavier than the stolen water skin that now lay forgotten on the ground. Dawn broke over the mountains as Sarah was led through the Apache camp. Women paused in their morning tasks to stare. Children pointed and whispered. The warriors' faces remained impassive, but their eyes followed her progress with varying degrees of curiosity and disdain. Red Wolf walked ahead, his broad shoulders straight, steps confident. He had not bound her wrists. There was no need. Miles of unforgiving desert stretched in all directions, promising a slow death to anyone foolish enough to flee. They stopped before a dwelling larger than the others. A woman emerged, elderly but straight-backed, with eyes sharp as flint. She assessed Sarah with unconcealed disapproval before speaking rapidly to Red Wolf in their language. His response was brief but final. The old woman's mouth tightened, but she stepped aside. "My grandmother," Red Wolf explained, motioning for Sarah to enter. "She says white women bring trouble." The interior was surprisingly cool and orderly. Woven mats covered the packed earth floor. Cooking implements hung from support poles. Furs and blankets were stacked neatly against one wall. "You sleep there," he indicated a space separated from the main area by a hanging hide. "You work with women during day. You learn our ways," Sarah found her voice. "And at night." Red Wolf's expression didn't change. "You are mine for 30 nights. My people will respect this." From a cedar chest, he withdrew a blanket of intricate design, deep reds and blacks woven in patterns unlike any Sarah had seen. He placed it around her shoulders, his fingers brushing her collarbone. She suppressed a shiver. "This marks you as mine," he said. "No one will harm you while you wear it." The old woman returned with a clay bowl of stew. She thrust it at Sarah without meeting her eyes, then spoke again to Red Wolf before departing. "What did she say?" Sarah asked, clutching the blanket around herself. "She says I should have killed you." His voice held no emotion. "It would be simpler." Sarah raised her chin. "And why didn't you?" For the first time, something like amusement flickered in his dark eyes. "Perhaps I prefer complicated." He moved toward the entrance. "Eat, rest. At midday you begin work." Left alone, Sarah sank to the floor, the bowl trembling in her hands. The stew smelled of unfamiliar spices, yet her stomach cramped with hunger. She ate slowly, trying to make sense of her situation. The women set her to grinding corn that afternoon. They spoke around her, not to her, in their flowing language. One younger than the rest, with a small child strapped to her back, occasionally translated curt instructions. "I am Sparrow," she said finally. "You are not first white woman in our camp." "Others did not live long. Were they claimed as I was?" Sarah asked, blisters forming on her palms from the stone grinder. Sparrow's expression darkened. "No, they were taken in raids. They fought or tried to run. Always they died." She studied Sarah curiously. "You do not fight or run. Would it change anything if I did?" Sparrow shrugged. "No, but most white women do not understand this." As sunset painted the hills copper and gold, Sarah was summoned back to Red Wolf's dwelling. He sat cross-legged by a small fire, sharpening a knife. He did not look up as she entered, her heart hammered against her ribs. The first night of 30. Would he claim his payment now? She clutched the ceremonial blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Sleep," he said. The screams erupted just after midday. Sarah stood at the stream, washing a stack of woven baskets when war cries split the air. Women dropped their tasks and ran toward the camp, snatching up children as they fled. Sarah hesitated only briefly before following. Riders burst from the tree line, warriors painted for battle, but not Apache. Their markings were different, their cries foreign to her ears. They swept through the camp with brutal efficiency, setting fire to dwellings, cutting down anyone in their path. Sarah ducked behind a large boulder, heart pounding. From her position, she could see most of the camp. Red Wolf and his warriors had mounted a defense, but they'd been caught unprepared. Many were away hunting. A small form darted between burning structures, a child no more than 4, wailing in terror. Without thinking, Sarah Nally, still focused on his blade. Tomorrow brings more work. Sarah hesitated, confusion mingling with relief. You don't want... His eyes met hers, unreadable in the firelight. 30 nights you are mine. How I claim each night is my choice. He returned to his task. Tonight, I choose sleep. She retreated behind the hanging hide, her thoughts in turmoil. Was this mercy or merely prolonging her fear? Either way, she had survived the first day. 29 more remained. 4 days into her captivity, Sarah had developed a routine. Rise before dawn, help the women prepare morning meals. Gather wood, carry water, scrape hides, or grind corn. Keep her head down. Speak little. Each night, she returned to Red Wolf's dwelling to find him distant but not cruel. He had yet to touch her. The screams erupted just after midday. Sarah stood at the stream, washing a stack of woven baskets, when war cries split the air. Women dropped their tasks and ran toward the camp, snatching up children as they fled. Sarah hesitated only briefly before following. Riders burst from the tree line, warriors painted for battle, but not Apache. Their markings were different, their cries foreign to her ears. They swept through the camp with brutal efficiency, setting fire to dwellings, cutting down anyone in their path. Sarah ducked behind a large boulder, heart pounding. From her position, she could see most of the camp. Red Wolf and his warriors had mounted a defense, but they'd been caught unprepared. Many were away hunting. A small form darted between burning structures. A child no more than 4, wailing in terror. Without thinking, Sarah abandoned her hiding place. She ran low across the open ground, reaching the boy seconds before a mounted warrior bore down on them. She scooped the child into her arms and pivoted, feeling the rush of air as a war club swept through the space where they had stood. The warrior wheeled his horse for another pass. Sarah spotted a narrow gap between 2 dwellings and lunged for it, clutching the boy to her chest. The space was too tight for horse and rider. She pressed deeper into the shadows, whispering soothing nonsense to the trembling child. His small arms locked around her neck with desperate strength. An arrow whizzed past, embedding itself in the structure beside her head. The obsidian tip gleamed wickedly. Sarah pushed farther back, praying the shadows would conceal them. Across the clearing, she spotted Red Wolf locked in combat with 2 attackers. Even outnumbered, he fought with breathtaking skill. One opponent already lay motionless at his feet. As she watched, he dispatched a second with a precise knife thrust. The third drove a lance into Red Wolf's side. Sarah gasped as he staggered, clutching at the wound. Blood seeped between his fingers. Still, he remained standing, raising his knife in defiance. Before his opponent could finish him, an Apache arrow took the attacker in the throat. Reinforcements had arrived, the hunting party returning to defend their home. The tide of battle turned swiftly. The raiders, realizing they'd lost their advantage, began to retreat. Within minutes, they had melted back into the forest, leaving destruction in their wake. Sarah emerged cautiously, still holding the boy. A woman rushed forward with a cry, gathering the child into her arms. She met Sarah's eyes briefly, an unexpected gratitude passing between them. Red Wolf had collapsed near the central fire pit. Blood pooled beneath him, his breathing labored. The tribe's medicine woman knelt at his side, pressing herbs against the wound, but her weathered face showed grave concern. The point broke off inside, Sparrow translated, appearing at Sarah's side. She cannot reach it. Sarah thought of Thomas, of the mining accidents she had helped treat before the doctor arrived. Of her father's tutelage in basic medicine. I can help, she said. Sparrow looked doubtful, but conveyed the offer. The old medicine woman scowled, barking a response. She says white woman's touch will poison his spirit. Sarah knelt beside them anyway. Tell her I belong to him. My touch is already on him. She studied the wound. He will die if that arrowhead remains. After tense negotiation, Sarah was permitted to try. Someone brought her a small knife heated in fire. Another provided gut string for stitching. Clean water was fetched from the stream. Red Wolf's eyes flickered open as she prepared. Recognition dawned, followed by confusion. "Be still," she said, more gently than she had intended. "This will hurt." He managed a pained smile. "Will you use this chance to kill me, white woman?" "If I wanted you dead," she replied, cleaning the area around the wound, "I would simply walk away." The extraction was difficult. The obsidian point lodged against a rib. Red Wolf remained conscious throughout, his jaw clenched, eyes fixed on her face. When she finally retrieved the arrowhead, a murmur went through the gathered crowd. She cleaned and stitched the wound as Thomas had taught her, then bound it with strips of clean cloth. Only when she had finished did she realize that the entire tribe had been watching, and that something fundamental had shifted in their gaze. Red Wolf's recovery progressed slowly. Sarah changed his dressings twice daily, brewing pine needle tea to combat fever. The medicine woman observed with narrowed eyes, but gradually offered small nods of approval. Progress of a different sort. "Why did you help me?" Red Wolf asked on the 7th day, strong enough now to sit outside his dwelling in the morning sun. "You could have let me die." Sarah paused in grinding herbs. "Would you have left me to die?" "Perhaps once." His gaze was steady. "Now no." Something fluttered in her chest, not quite fear, not quite hope. "There's your answer." Life in the camp had acquired a rhythm Sarah hadn't expected to find comfortable. The women no longer turned away when she approached. Several had begun teaching her their crafts, Sparrow showing her how to weave yucca fibers into baskets, an older woman named Dove demonstrating how to scrape and tan hides properly. "Your hands are soft," Dove remarked, watching Sarah struggle with a particularly tough section. "Like a child's." "In Boston, ladies weren't expected to do such work," Sarah admitted, wincing as the scraper slipped and nicked her palm. Dove snorted. "Then Boston women are useless." Rather than taking offense, Sarah laughed. "Perhaps we are." That evening she completed her first basket. The weave was uneven, the pattern irregular, but it held together. She presented it to Red Wolf with unexpected nervousness. He examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands. "First attempt?" "Yes, better than my first knife." A smile touched his lips. "I was 8. Nearly cut off my thumb." The image of a young red wolf, serious-faced and determined, struck her with surprising poignancy. "Did your father teach you?" His expression closed. "My father died before I could hold a knife. My mother's brother taught me." He set the basket aside. "Tomorrow I will show you how to find food in the desert." The lesson began at dawn. Though still favoring his injured side, Red Wolf proved an exacting teacher. He showed her which cactus fruits were edible, which roots could be dug for water, which plants held medicine. "White people starve in land of plenty," he observed, watching her extract nectar from a spiny barrel cactus. "They see only what is missing, not what is offered." By midday, her skin was salt-crusted with sweat, her dress torn from thorns, but her makeshift bag held enough forage food to comprise a meal. Pride straightened her spine as they returned to camp. They encountered a group of warriors at the perimeter. Among them stood a tall man whose scarred face twisted with contempt upon seeing Sarah. He spoke rapidly to Red Wolf, gesturing toward her with obvious disgust. Red Wolf's response was calm but firm. The scarred man spat on the ground near Sarah's feet before stalking away. "What was that about?" as she asked once they were alone. "Black Knife believes I weaken myself with a white woman." Red Wolf's expression remained neutral. "He thinks you should have been killed." "He's not alone in that opinion." "No, but I am war chief. My decisions are not questioned." Something in his tone suggested the matter was less settled than his words implied. That night, Sarah counted days on a strip of rawhide. 7 notches. 7 knights claimed, 23 remaining. The realization brought less relief than she expected. In Red Wolf's dwelling, she found him examining her basket again. "Does it displease you?" she asked, settling on her sleeping mat. "It reminds me of something." He set it down carefully. "My mother wove like this. Uneven at first, but she learned quickly." His eyes, when they met hers, held something new. "As do you. I had good teachers. Once I stopped fighting against learning, that is wisdom." He moved to tend the fire. Many never learn it. The flames painted his features in gold and shadow. In that moment, he looked less the fearsome war chief and more a man, complex, thoughtful, and carrying burdens she was only beginning to perceive. "When your 30 nights are complete," he said without looking up, "what will you do?" The question caught her unprepared. Until that moment, she had thought only of surviving each day, not beyond. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "There's nothing waiting for me in the white world. And in this world?" His eyes met hers across the fire. Sarah's breath caught. "I don't know that either." Something unspoken passed between them, as tangible as the ceremonial blanket still folded carefully among her few possessions. Neither acknowledged it, but both felt its presence, a shift like weather changing, like seasons turning. 23 nights remained, and suddenly that seemed both too many and not enough. The council fire burned high, under a sky scattered with stars. Tribal elders sat in a semicircle, faces solemn in the flickering light. Red Wolf occupied the position of honor, his bearing regal despite his healing wound. Black Knife sat opposite, eyes gleaming with barely concealed hostility. Sarah watched from the shadows at Red Wolf's instruction. Women rarely attended council meetings, but he wanted her to understand the politics at play. The eldest passed a carved stick to Red Wolf, signaling the beginning of deliberations. He spoke in measured tones, addressing the recent attack and plans to strengthen their defenses. When he finished, he passed the stick to a gray-haired elder on his right. The discussion flowed smoothly until the talking stick reached Black Knife. He rose, muscles tensed like a predator, preparing to strike. "Red Wolf's judgment is clouded by the white woman," he declared, switching to English so Sarah would understand. "He brings danger to our people. The Pale Eyes attacked Broken Rock Clan last moon. They burned villages on the western plains. Yet Red Wolf keeps one as his pet," murmurs rippled through the assembly. Red Wolf remained impassive. "The woman saved a child during the raid," countered a middle-aged warrior. "She healed our war chief when his spirit might have joined the ancestors," Black Knife sneered. "Perhaps it was her people who told the Navajo where to find us. Perhaps she heals him only to keep him weak." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Sarah felt eyes turn toward her hiding place. She forced herself to remain still, though indignation burned in her chest. "If I wanted him weak," she said before she could stop herself, "I would have left the arrowhead inside him." Silence fell. Women did not speak in council without invitation. She had just broken a sacred tradition. To her surprise, Red Wolf's lips curved slightly. "The woman speaks truth," he said, reclaiming the talking stick. "She has proven herself useful to the people. She stays until her 30 nights are complete. This is not for council to decide." Black Knife's face darkened. "The war chief keeps a snake in his blankets and wonders why he feels its fangs." He addressed the elders directly. "Red Wolf was once our strongest defender. Now he protects a white thief who may betray us to her own kind. They say we need a new war chief, one whose mind is clear." The challenge was unmistakable. Several warriors shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the two men. Red Wolf rose slowly, his hand falling to the knife at his belt. "You wish to claim my place, Black Knife?" His voice remained calm, but danger edged each word. "There is a way for this." The elder with the talking stick intervened, speaking rapidly in Apache. Both men subsided, though tension still crackled between them. Later, in the privacy of Red Wolf's dwelling, Sarah confronted him. What was the elder saying? "About the way to claim your place." "Combat," he replied, checking his wound dressing. "To death or submission. It is how I became war chief. And Black Knife wants to fight you? Now while you're injured?" His smile held no humor. "It would be wise timing on his part. Because of me." The realization settled heavily. "I'm the excuse he's been waiting for." Red Wolf studied her face. "Perhaps, but he has wanted my position since we were boys." He adjusted the bandage. "His father and mine were rivals. Some conflicts span generations, like the conflict between our peoples." The question slipped out unbidden. Something flickered in his eyes. "Yes, like that. What aren't you telling me, Red Wolf?" She moved closer, noticing how he tensed. There's more to why you claimed me than 30 nights of service. There is always more. He turned away. Get rest. Tomorrow we move camp. Black Knife is right about one thing. We are vulnerable here. That night, voices woke her. Red Wolf stood with Sparrow's husband, Swift Deer, speaking in hushed tones. She caught fragments. Cavalry patrol, 3 days' ride, many soldiers. When Swift Deer left, she emerged from behind the hanging hide. The white soldiers are coming. Red Wolf's expression was unreadable. Always listening, Sarah Bennett. It was the first time he had used her name. Tell me the truth, she said. Am I in danger from them or from you? Both neither. He sank down beside the dying embers. The soldiers seek what soldiers always seek. Glory, conquest, blood. If they find you here... He left the sentence unfinished. They'll assume I'm a captive. She wrapped her arms around herself. That you... Yes, but you haven't. The words emerged softer than intended. His eyes met hers in the dimness. No, I claimed 30 nights. Not your body. Why? The question hung between them, intimate and dangerous. For a moment she thought he might answer truthfully. Instead he rose. We leave at dawn. 9 nights have passed. 21 remain. He moved toward the entrance. The council believes you belong to me. Black Knife suspects otherwise. Both are problems. After he departed, Sarah remained by the fire, turning his words over like stones in a stream. Something deeper lurked beneath this arrangement. Something Red Wolf wasn't ready to reveal. For the first time, she wondered not about surviving her 30 nights, but about what secrets would be unveiled before they ended. The new camp nestled in a hidden valley 3 days' journey from their previous location. Natural springs provided water. Steep cliffs offered protection on 3 sides. Sentries posted at the valley's narrow entrance ensured no one approached undetected. 2 weeks into her captivity, Sarah had earned a measure of freedom. She gathered herbs beyond the camp boundaries, learned hunting techniques from the women, and shared some of her own knowledge in return. She taught several children English words, much to their mother's amusement. She discovered a talent for drawing with charcoal from the fire. Having noticed her sketching plants for identification, Dove brought her a smooth piece of bark to use as parchment. Make pictures, the older woman encouraged. Show us your spirit. That evening, Sarah sat outside Red Wolf's dwelling, capturing the sunset in broad strokes. He emerged silently, watching over her shoulder. You create beauty from ashes, he observed. She startled, not having heard his approach. My father taught me. He believed education should include appreciation of beauty. Your father sounds wise. He was. She hesitated. At least I thought so as a child. Red Wolf settled beside her. And as a woman, I've learned wisdom isn't always where we expect to find it. She studied his profile in the fading light, the strong lines of his face softened by evening shadows. May I? She gestured with her charcoal. Surprise flickered across his features, but he nodded. He remained perfectly still as she worked, capturing the proud angle of his jaw, the watchful intensity of his eyes, the subtle curve of his lips that suggested humor rarely displayed. When she finished, she offered him the drawing. He studied it in silence, expression unreadable. Is this how you see me? He finally asked. It's how you are when you forget to be war chief. She met his gaze steadily. When you're just a man. Something shifted in his eyes, a barrier lowering. Few see that man, perhaps few look. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged. Then Black Knife's voice cut through the stillness. Calling for Red Wolf. The soldiers have been spotted, he reported, pointedly ignoring Sarah. 2 days' ride to the south, following the river. Red Wolf nodded. Double the sentries tonight. We will discuss strategy at morning council. After Black Knife departed, Sarah asked, what will happen if they find this camp? And they will demand all white captives be released. His expression hardened. When we explain there are none, they will not believe us. Then there will be blood. Because of me. No, because soldiers need little reason for violence. He studied her face. You wish to return to your people? The question wasn't simple. 2 weeks ago, she would have answered instantly. Now uncertainty clouded her response. They aren't my people anymore, she said slowly. I have no place there, and here. She gestured to the camp, the women preparing evening meals, children playing chase between dwellings. I'm beginning to understand your ways. I'm useful. She paused, searching for the right word. I'm respected in a fashion. You've earned that respect, but what happens after the 30 nights? Where do I go then? He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. That bridge we will cross when we reach it. Later that night, unable to sleep, Sarah slipped outside. The moon cast silver light across the valley. She found Red Wolf at the edge of camp, gazing at the stars. 14 nights, he said without turning. We have passed the halfway point. You've been counting too. She settled beside him, drawing the ceremonial blanket closer around her shoulders. The nights had grown cooler as they moved to higher elevation. It was meant as punishment, he admitted. 30 nights of service for your theft. And now I find myself... He paused, searching for words. Uncertain, the admission clearly cost him. Sarah felt a strange flutter in her chest. Because of the soldiers. Because of many things. His gaze remained fixed on the stars. In 2 weeks, you will be free of your obligation. Free to leave. Is that what you want? Red Wolf finally turned to her, moonlight silvering his features. What I want has not mattered since I became war chief. My people come first. And what do your people want? Safety, survival, to be left in peace. His voice hardened. Things your kind have never permitted. The brief connection between them cooled. Sarah rose, feeling the weight of history pressing down. There must be a middle ground, she said. Some place between your world and mine where peace is possible. If such a place exists, he replied. I have not found it. She studied his face, remembering how it felt to capture his likeness, to see past the warrior to the man. Perhaps we should look together. His eyes met hers, surprise flickering in their depths. For a heartbeat, she thought he might reach for her. Instead, he nodded slightly, a gesture neither acceptance nor rejection, but acknowledgement of possibility. 16 nights remained to discover if such a middle ground could be found. Dawn broke with urgent voices. Sarah emerged from the dwelling to find the camp in controlled chaos. Warriors gathered weapons. Women packed essential belongings. Children were unusually subdued. The soldiers are coming, Sparrow explained, thrusting a basket into Sarah's hands. They found our trail. Red Wolf strode through camp, issuing commands. When he saw Sarah, he beckoned her aside. You have a choice to make, he said without preamble. The cavalry is half a day's ride from here. 20 men, well armed. They'll reach us by nightfall. Yes. His face revealed nothing of his thoughts. When they arrive, you could return with them. The possibility hung in the air between them. Freedom, safety, return to civilization. Is that what you want? She asked. It does not matter what I want. His voice remained neutral. The choice is yours. 15 days remain of your obligation, but I release you from them. Your debt is paid. Before she could respond, Black Knife approached. The scouts report the soldiers have a guide, a white man who claims his sister was taken by Apaches. Sarah frowned. I have no brother. All white men claim relation when it serves them, Black Knife said dismissively. They use any excuse to hunt us. Red Wolf considered this news. We move to the high caves. Gather only what can be carried. Leave no trail. And her? Black Knife jerked his chin toward Sarah. She decides her own path. Red Wolf met Sarah's eyes briefly before turning away. We leave within the hour. Left alone, Sarah returned to the dwelling to gather her few possessions. The ceremonial blanket, her father's Bible, the charcoal drawing of Red Wolf, such meager evidence of the life-changing weeks she'd spent among people she once feared. Dove found her there, contemplating these items. You go with blue coats? The older woman asked. I don't know. Sarah folded the blanket carefully. What would you do? Dove snorted. I am Apache. There is no choice for me. There's always choice. Then choose wisely. Dove placed a small bundle of dried herbs in Sarah's hand. For memory if you go. By midday, the tribe had vanished into the rugged landscape, leaving minimal evidence of their presence. Sarah rode behind Red Wolf, his back straight, his attention focused on the difficult path ahead. They reached the high caves as afternoon shadows lengthened. From this vantage point, Sarah could see the valley floor below, and the dust cloud signaling the cavalry's approach. Red Wolf noticed it too. "It is time for your decision." The weight of the moment pressed upon her. Return to a world that had no place for her, or remain with people still learning to trust her? "If I stay," she said carefully, "what would that mean? You would be one of us. Not captured, not owned." His eyes held hers. "Free to go or stay as you choose each day. And us?" The question emerged barely above a whisper. Something flickered in his expression. Hope, perhaps, or uncertainty. "That too would be your choice," a sentry called out. Down in the valley, cavalry blue appeared between the trees. "They will search for days," Red Wolf said. "If you wish to join them, I will have swift deer guide you down a safe path." Sarah looked toward the soldiers, then back at the Apache camp, taking shape around the caves. Women setting up temporary dwellings, children helping with tasks despite their exhaustion. A community bound by something stronger than blood. "I need to see them," she decided. Not to join them, but to end that chapter properly. Red Wolf studied her face, then nodded. "I will accompany you." They descended by a hidden trail, emerging onto a ridge overlooking the abandoned camp. Below, soldiers methodically searched the area. A man in civilian clothes gestured animatedly, his voice carrying in the still air. "They took her." "My sister Sarah." "You have to track them down." Sarah recognized him with a jolt, not her brother, but Thomas's gambling partner, who'd tried to claim her after the funeral. "He lies," she whispered. "Most men do when they want something." Red Wolf's voice held no. "Surprise!" The cavalry captain removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. A button from his uniform caught the sunlight, gleaming silver against the blue wool. "Miss Bennet may not wish to be found," the captain replied. "Our intelligence suggests she went willingly." The false brother sputtered protests. Sarah had heard enough. She turned away from the scene below, decision crystallized. "Take me back," she said to Red Wolf. "I've seen what I needed to see." He studied her face. "You choose to stay." "I choose the middle ground we spoke of." She held his gaze steadily. "For now." As they climbed back toward the caves, Sarah reached down and plucked a silver button that had caught on a branch, fallen from a soldier's uniform during their search. She slipped it into her pocket, a reminder of a world she had just deliberately walked away from. 15 nights remained in her bargain. But for the first time, she found herself hoping for more. The tribe remained in the high caves for 3 days, waiting for the cavalry to abandon their search. On the 4th morning, scouts reported the soldiers had departed, leaving the valley clear. Sarah had noticed Red Wolf growing increasingly distant since her decision to stay. He spoke to her only when necessary, his eyes avoiding hers. The easy companionship they'd begun to develop had vanished, replaced by a tension she couldn't understand. When they returned to the valley camp, she confronted him. "Have I offended you by staying?" "No." His response was clipped. "Then why do you avoid me?" "What's changed?" He studied the distant mountains. "You have chosen to remain among us, yet you don't know why I claimed you. You needed someone to grind corn." She attempted humor, but his expression remained grave. "Come." He led her to his dwelling, where he retrieved a small leather pouch from beneath his sleeping mat. From it, he withdrew a yellow document, carefully unfolding it. "I cannot read the white man's marks," he said, handing it to her. "But I know what it says." Sarah examined the paper, a military commission dated 15 years earlier, authorizing Captain William Bennett to pacify hostile Indian elements in the Arizona Territory. Her father's signature sprawled across the bottom. "This was my father's," she said, confusion clouding her thoughts. "Where did you get it?" "From his body." Red Wolf's voice was devoid of emotion. "After he ordered his men to slaughter my village." The world seemed to tilt beneath her. "What are you saying?" "Your father led bluecoats to my people's camp at dawn. They killed everyone, women, children, elders." His eyes held hers, unflinching. "I was hunting with my uncle. We returned to find our families butchered." Sarah's hands trembled. "There must be some mistake. My father was a merchant. He commanded soldiers before becoming a merchant. Red Wolf's voice hardened. I was 10 winters old. I buried my mother, my sisters, my grandparents. 28 people. I remembered his face. I remembered his name. Horror washed through her as understanding dawned. You knew who I was when I stole from your camp. Yes. No emotion colored the admission. I recognized you from the moment I saw you. Bennett's daughter. You have his eyes. So the 30 nights. Her voice faltered. It was never about the theft. It was about justice. He reclaimed the document, folding it carefully. I planned to make you suffer as I suffered. To take everything from you, as your father took everything from me. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm day. Why are you telling me this now? Because you chose to stay. His eyes reflected a pain so deep it stole her breath. And I can no longer pretend this is simply about a water skin and 30 nights of service. The magnitude of his revelation crashed over her. All this time, she had been living with a man who had every reason to hate her, to want her dead. What stopped you? She whispered. Why didn't you kill me when you had the chance? I intended to. His admission was unflinching. Then I saw you save that child during the raid. I watched you pull the arrowhead from my wound when you could have let me die. I observed you learn our ways without complaint. He paused. You were not what I expected. I'm not my father. The words emerged with unexpected force. No. His gaze softened fractionally. You are not. What happens now? She gestured helplessly. How can I stay knowing this? That is your choice. But now you choose with open eyes. He moved toward the dwelling entrance. 15 nights remain of our bargain. After that, our debt, both yours and mine, is finished. He left her alone with the implications of his revelation. Sarah sank to the ground, mind reeling. Her father, the man she'd idolized, a murderer of innocence. Her presence here, not chance, but calculated revenge. Her growing feelings for Red Wolf, built on a foundation of lies. Yet even amid the betrayal, she recognized a strange integrity in his confession. He could have maintained the deception. Instead, he'd offered truth, knowing it might drive her away. Outside, life in the camp continued, women talking as they worked, children playing, men preparing for a hunt. People she had come to respect. A world where she had begun to find her place. 15 nights remained of their bargain, but everything had changed. The middle ground she'd hoped to find now seemed impossibly distant. Separated by rivers of blood neither of them had spilled, but both inherited. Sarah touched the silver cavalry button in her pocket, then the commission with her father's name. 2 worlds, both built on violence and deception. Where did she truly belong? The answer, she realized, lay in the 15 nights ahead, and whether 2 people scarred by the same tragedy could forge something new from the ashes of the past. For 2 days, Sarah avoided Red Wolf. She performed her duties mechanically, speaking only when necessary. At night, she slept in Dove's dwelling, unable to face the man who had claimed her life to avenge his family's death. The tribe noticed the change. Whispers followed her. Even those who had begun to accept her now regarded her with renewed suspicion. What happened? Sparrow asked as they gathered wild onions beyond the camp perimeter. He told me the truth, Sarah replied, digging with more force than necessary. About why he really claimed me. Understanding dawned in Sparrow's eyes. You know about the massacre. Sarah's hands stilled. You knew? Everyone knows. Sparrow's voice softened. It is why many doubted his judgment in keeping you alive. Then why didn't anyone tell me? It was not our truth to tell. Sparrow continued gathering plants. Red Wolf carries many burdens as war chief. The heaviest is the memory of that day. Sarah returned to camp with her basket full and her thoughts in turmoil. In the central clearing, she found Red Wolf conferring with the tribal council. Black Knife's voice carried across the space. She knows too much now. She is dangerous. She has proven herself trustworthy, argued Swift Deer. She is Bennett's daughter. Black Knife spat. Blood calls to blood. She will betray us the first chance she gets. Sarah approached the circle, chin raised, despite the hostility directed her way. I'm not my father, Black Knife sneered. The fox cub grows to hunt chickens, just like its mother. Enough. Red Wolf's command cut through the tension. The council will decide this matter privately. As the elders moved toward the council fire, Red Wolf intercepted Sarah. You should not have interrupted. They're discussing my fate. I deserve to be heard. His expression remained impassive. It is not our way. Your way is to condemn me for crimes I didn't commit, for being born to the wrong father. Anger rose in her chest. I thought you were different. I thought you could see past blood. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or regret. I see more clearly than anyone. I see the daughter of the man who destroyed everything I loved. Then why did you tell me the truth? She stepped closer, challenging him. You could have maintained the lie until our 30 nights were complete. Why reveal yourself now? Because you deserve to know why your father's name is cursed among my people. His voice hardened. And because I could no longer carry the weight of that knowledge alone. Sarah felt the last of her illusions crumble. So this was never about me at all. It was always about him. Yes. The admission hung between them. At first, and now, he didn't answer, his gaze shifting beyond her to where Black Knife watched their exchange with obvious disapproval. The council waits, he said finally. I must go. Sarah retreated to her work area, where she had been grinding corn with a stone mortar and pestle. Her hands shook as she resumed the task, striking the stone with increasing force. Memories flashed through her mind. Her father's gentle smile as he taught her to read. His stories of adventures in far-off places. His pride when she mastered a new skill. How could that man have ordered a massacre? How could he have lived with himself afterward? How could he have returned to Boston, built a merchant empire, raised a family, all while the blood of Red Wolf's people stained his hands? The pestle cracked against the mortar with such force that a chunk of stone broke off, skittering across the ground. The broken tool mirrored the fractures in her understanding of herself, her past, her place in the world. Dove appeared beside her, silently assessing the damage. Stone breaks, the older woman observed. Hearts break too. Both can be mended. Some breaks can't be repaired, Sarah whispered. All breaks leave scars, Dove corrected. But scars are proof of healing, not failure. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion rose from the council area. Voices raised in argument. Red Wolf and Black Knife stood facing each other, tension vibrating between them. What's happening? She asked. Dove's expression grew grim. Black Knife challenges Red Wolf's leadership. He says keeping Bennett's daughter shows weakness. Because of me. The realization settled heavily. Not just you. Dove watched the confrontation with knowing eyes. Black Knife has waited many seasons for this moment. You are his excuse, not his reason. The two warriors circled each other now, the council looking on. Though no weapons had been drawn, the threat of violence hung in the air. Can Red Wolf defeat him? Sarah asked, once easily. Dove glanced at her. But his wound still weakens him. And his heart is divided. Sarah watched the man who had claimed her, saved her, and ultimately told her a truth that could destroy them both. Whatever his original intentions, he had shown her respect when he could have shown only vengeance. He had offered her choice when he could have offered only subjugation. The decision of the council would determine her fate. But first, Red Wolf would have to survive Black Knife's challenge. 13 nights remained of their bargain. Sarah wondered if either of them would live to see the end of it. The confrontation between Red Wolf and Black Knife ended without bloodshed, but only just. The council had intervened, decreeing that such a challenge could not proceed while external threats loomed. Leadership would remain with Red Wolf until the tribe reached safer grounds. Black Knife had retreated, his ambitions temporarily thwarted, but his resentment visibly deepened. His supporters, a minority but a vocal one, cast hostile glances at both Red Wolf and Sarah. The matter is postponed, not settled, Swift Deer explained as he helped Sarah repair her broken mortar. Black Knife will wait for a more favorable moment. Because of me, she said. It wasn't a question. You are part of it. Swift Deer worked with practiced hands, but the conflict between them spans many seasons. They were boys together, both sons of chiefs, both destined to lead. Only one could become war chief, and Red Wolf prevailed, through skill and wisdom, yes. Swift Deer's expression grew somber, but Black Knife never accepted defeat. He believes Red Wolf has grown soft. Your presence gives weight to his argument. Before Sarah could respond, a sentry's call pierced the air. A rider approached at speed, one of their scouts, his horse lathered with exertion. The camp mobilized instantly. Warriors formed a protective line, while women gathered children close. Red Wolf strode forward to meet the scout, who slid from his mount and spoke urgently. Gesturing toward the south, Sarah edged closer, straining to hear. Many soldiers, the scout reported in Apache. Sparrow translating quietly at Sarah's side. 2 days' ride. With cannons. Red Wolf's expression remained calm, but Sarah saw his shoulders tense. How many? 5 hands of men. They have papers with marks. They study them often. Maps. The cavalry was using maps to navigate the territory, and with enough precision to bring cannons through the rugged landscape. Someone had provided them with detailed intelligence. The council gathered immediately. This time, Sarah did not interrupt, but listened from a respectful distance. The debate was heated, opinions divided between immediate evacuation and standing to fight. We cannot outrun cannons, Black Knife argued. We must ambush them before they reach the valley. Fighting will bring more soldiers, countered an elder. Always more. Then we negotiate, Swift Deer suggested. Offer peace. Bitter laughter met this proposal. Peace? When has the white man ever honored peace with our people? Sarah felt eyes turn toward her, not just Black Knife and his supporters, but others too. Even those who had begun to accept her presence now regarded her with suspicion. She approached the circle, waiting for acknowledgement before speaking. Red Wolf nodded, granting permission. I may be able to help, she offered. I understand how cavalry units operate from your father. Black Knife sneered. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Yes, from my father, who was wrong in his actions, but knowledgeable about military strategy. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Red Wolf studied her face. What do you suggest? Let me see what information the scout has gathered. I may recognize patterns in their movement. After brief deliberation, the council agreed. The scout brought forward a piece of bark on which he had drawn the soldiers' positions and direction of travel. Sarah studied it carefully. They're following established patrol routes, she observed. My father documented these in his journals. They'll camp by the river tomorrow night, then follow the ridge line to reach this valley by midday the following day. Swift Deer retrieved something from his dwelling, a folded paper taken from a dead cavalry officer months earlier. He spread it carefully on the ground. Is this what you mean? Sarah examined the military reconnaissance map with its neatly drawn routes, elevation markers, and her blood ran cold. A precise location marked for Red Wolf's camp. They know exactly where we are, she said softly. This isn't a random patrol. It's a targeted operation. Red Wolf crouched beside her, his shoulder nearly touching hers as he studied the map. Someone guides them, someone who knows your movements intimately. She met his eyes, understanding dawning. Someone from within the tribe. The implication hung heavy in the air. A traitor among them, feeding information to the cavalry, perhaps in exchange for protection or reward. Red Wolf's expression hardened. He issued rapid commands, organizing scouting parties and preparation for immediate evacuation. As the council dispersed, he pulled Sarah aside. You recognize the patrol routes instantly. I grew up studying my father's maps and journals. She held his gaze. I never thought I would use that knowledge to help those he sought to destroy. Something shifted in his eyes, a reassessment perhaps. 12 nights remained between us. I would see them completed without bloodshed, as would I. She hesitated. Red Wolf, whoever is betraying your people, they might have shared more than your location. They might have mentioned me, a white woman among Apaches, he nodded grimly. A convenient excuse for attack. Let me help, she said. Let me use what I know of their tactics to protect your people. His gaze held hers for a long moment. Our people, he corrected quietly. For now, at least, you are one of us. The acknowledgement warmed her despite the danger surrounding them. 12 nights remained of their bargain, but first they had to survive the coming storm. Night fell over a camp preparing for evacuation. The weakest, elders, young children, pregnant women, had already departed for the sanctuary of the high mountains, guided by trusted warriors. The rest would follow before dawn. Sarah found Red Wolf at the edge of camp, studying the stars. "The preparations are nearly complete," she reported. "Dove says they can be ready to move by first light." He nodded, his profile sharp against the night sky. "It may not be soon enough. What aren't you telling me?" She had come to recognize his expressions, the subtle tension in his jaw when he held back concerns. The scouts report the soldiers have increased their pace. "They will reach the valley by midday tomorrow. Then we need to slow them down." Sarah's mind worked through possibilities. Create obstacles on the trail. False tracks leading in multiple directions, already ordered. His voice was grim. It may not be enough. A plan had been forming in Sarah's mind since she'd seen the reconnaissance map. Dangerous. Perhaps foolish, but possibly their best hope. "Let me go to them," she said. Red Wolf turned sharply. "What? I'll approach their camp tonight." A white woman emerging from the wilderness. "They'll have to listen." She held his gaze steadily. "I can buy your people time to escape. They could shoot you as a traitor, or worse. I'm William Bennett's daughter," she countered. That name still carries weight with the military. His expression darkened at the mention of her father. "And what would you tell them?" "That you've been living willingly among those your father sought to exterminate." The words stung, but she didn't flinch. "I'll tell them what they need to hear. That I was captured, that I escaped, that I know where your people are headed." She stepped closer. "False information that leads them away from your true path." Red Wolf studied her face in the moonlight. "Why would you risk this?" "Because innocent people will die otherwise." She hesitated. "Children, elders, people I've come to care for." Something shifted in his expression. "Including their war chief?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken emotion. Sarah found she couldn't lie, not to him, not anymore. "Yes," she admitted softly. "Despite everything." He turned away, conflict evident in the rigid set of his shoulders. "I cannot ask this of you. You're not asking. I'm offering." She moved to stand beside him. "This is my choice, Red Wolf. Let me use what I am, a white woman, Bennett's daughter, to protect your people." For long moments, he remained silent. Then with deliberate movements, he untied a thin braided band from around his wrist, horsehair woven with sinew, adorned with a single blue bead. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "She placed it on my wrist the morning she died for protection." His eyes met Sarah's. "If you do this, you must wear it. And you must return it to me." The implication was clear, a promise that she would come back. Sarah extended her wrist, allowing him to tie the bracelet in place. His fingers lingered against her pulse point. "I will return," she said, the vow feeling sacred in the stillness between them. Swift Deer would guide her close to the cavalry camp, then return to help with the evacuation. By morning, she would be with the soldiers, feeding them misinformation while the tribe escaped in the opposite direction. As preparations were made for her departure, Black Knife approached. For once, his customary hostility was tempered with something like respect. "You risk much for people not your own," he observed. "They've become my people, too." She met his gaze without wavering. "Whether you accept that or not," a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Perhaps I judged too quickly. Perhaps we all did." Dawn was still hours away when Sarah prepared to leave. The ceremonial blanket remained folded in Red Wolf's dwelling. She could not risk bringing anything that marked her as having lived among the Apache. Instead, she wore her original dress, now mended and cleaned. The cavalry button was tucked into her pocket. Only the horsehair bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve connected her to the life she was temporarily leaving. Behind, Red Wolf walked with her to where Swift Deer waited with the horses. 11 nights remain of our bargain," he said quietly. "I haven't forgotten." She held his gaze in the pre-dawn darkness. "I'll find my way back to honor our agreement. Something unspoken passed between them, regret for past deceptions, hope for future truths. Then Swift Deer signaled it was time to depart. As Sarah mounted the horse, Red Wolf placed his hand briefly over hers. "Return safely," he said, the command gentle but firm. "The middle ground we spoke of, perhaps it exists after all." She nodded, throat tight with emotion. Then she turned her horse and rode into the darkness, carrying the fate of Red Wolf's people and her own heart into unknown danger. The cavalry camp buzzed with activity as Sarah was escorted to the commander's tent. Captain James Harrington, a trim man with salt and pepper beard and calculating eyes, studied her with open skepticism. "Miss Bennet," he said, offering a seat across from his field desk, "your appearance is unexpected." "I escaped during the night," Sarah explained, maintaining the story she'd crafted. "I've been held captive by Red Wolf's band for nearly 3 weeks, yet you appear remarkably well treated for a captive." His gaze swept over her clean clothing and unbruised skin. Sarah had anticipated this. "I was valuable to them, my knowledge of medicine. They needed me alive and able to work." Harrington nodded slowly. "Your companion has been most concerned." He gestured to a figure entering the tent. Thomas's gambling partner, Edward Langley, rushed forward with exaggerated relief. "Sarah, thank God you're safe." He attempted to embrace her, but she stepped back. "Mr. Langley and I are acquaintances only," she informed the captain coldly. "He is not my brother, despite his claims." Langley's expression soured. "She's confused from her ordeal, Captain. The savages have—" "I am perfectly sound of mind," Sarah interrupted, "and I know precisely who my relatives are." Harrington's eyes narrowed with interest. "Indeed, perhaps you would care to explain why Mr. Langley has led us on this rescue mission, if you are not, in fact, his sister. I suspect his motivations have more to do with Apache land than with my welfare." She held the captain's gaze. "As do yours, sir." A tense silence fell. Harrington dismissed Langley with a curt nod, then studied Sarah with new appreciation. "You are remarkably direct, Miss Bennet. Your father was similar in that regard. You knew my father?" "I served under Captain Bennet early in my career." Harrington's expression remained neutral. "A man of decisive action." The euphemism for her father's brutality turned Sarah's stomach, but she maintained her composure. "Captain, your mission here concerns me. This show of force against the Apache seems disproportionate." Harrington leaned back. "They've raided settlements, Miss Bennet. Stolen property. Taken captives, yourself included. I was not taken. I stole from them and was caught." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. The captain's eyebrows rose. "You confessed to theft from the Apache?" "I was starving and desperate after my husband's death." She straightened. "The point remains. This force is excessive for simple peacekeeping." Harrington studied her for a long moment before reaching into his desk. He withdrew a folded paper, spreading it on the surface between them. "Perhaps this will clarify our interest in these particular Apache lands." Sarah examined the crude map drawn on yellowed paper. It showed local topography with several areas marked by X's and notations about gold deposits. Rich veins running through the mountains that formed the heart of Apache territory. A prospector brought this to the territorial governor. 3 months ago, Harrington explained. Preliminary surveys confirm substantial deposits. So this isn't about protecting settlers. Sarah couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. It's about gold. It's about progress, Miss Bennet. The territory needs development, investment, infrastructure. His tone remained reasonable. The Apache are sitting on wealth they can't utilize. It's their land. By what deed? What claim beyond occupation? Harrington's mask of civility slipped. Resources must be properly exploited. The Apache stand in the way of territorial advancement. Sarah thought of the tribe evacuating their homes, again, because of white men's greed. They just want to live in peace. Peace requires compliance. Harrington refolded the map. Now, I believe you mentioned knowing where Red Wolf's band was headed. Sarah fed him the false information she'd prepared, a route leading northwest, away from the tribe's actual escape path to the south. She described fictional landmarks with confident detail, watching as Harrington marked them on his operational map. "We move out at dawn," he decided. "Miss Bennett, you will remain here under guard. Once the Apache are dealt with, you'll be escorted to the nearest settlement. And if I wish to leave now?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm afraid that's impossible. Your knowledge of the terrain is valuable, and your sympathies seem divided." She was a prisoner once more. She realized, this time by her own people, for the crime of understanding too much. That night, alone in a tent under guard, Sarah touched the horsehair bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve. The cavalry would follow her false trail for at least a day before realizing they'd been deceived. By then, Red Wolf's people would be safely hidden in the mountains, but Harrington wouldn't abandon his pursuit, not with gold at stake. And once he discovered her deception, her life would be worth nothing. She needed to escape, to warn Red Wolf about the gold map and the true scope of the threat. The Apache weren't facing a temporary military action, but a permanent campaign to seize their lands. Through the canvas walls, she heard guards discussing watch rotations. A change would occur at midnight. Perhaps then, a brief opportunity. 11 nights remained of her bargain with Red Wolf. She intended to honor that agreement and to protect the people who had become her own. Tomorrow night would mark the 30th day since her capture. She had imagined it might bring resolution, an end to their complex arrangement. Instead, it seemed increasingly likely that the 30th night would bring blood. Midnight brought opportunity. The changing of the guard created momentary confusion that Sarah exploited, slipping from her tent into the shadows. Her horse nickered softly as she approached the picket line. She selected a mount, whispering soothing words while untying its tether. A twig snapped. She froze. "Going somewhere, Miss Bennett?" Edward Langley emerged from darkness, a pistol aimed at her chest. "Mr. Langley, still pretending to be my concerned brother?" Her mind raced, calculating distances, options. "I had hoped to claim you properly after your rescue." His smile was cold. "A grieving widow needs protection, after all. And your father's estate remains substantial, so this was about my inheritance, among other assets." His gaze traveled over her body. "Though I fear your time with savages has diminished your value somewhat." Sarah's hand closed around a fallen branch. "Oh, you know nothing about value, Mr. Langley." She swung with all her strength. The branch connected with his wrist, sending the pistol flying. Langley lunged for her, but years of gambling had left him soft. Sarah ducked aside, scrambling for the horse. The gunshot cracked through the night air, not Langley's weapon, but a sentry's. The camp erupted with activity as Sarah urged her stolen mount forward, crashing through the underbrush toward the south, toward Red Wolf's people. Behind her, commands rang out. Horses thundered in pursuit. The cavalry would not easily surrender their prize. Sarah rode hard through the night, following landmarks she'd memorized. Dawn found her in the foothills, her horse lathered and breathing heavily. From a ridge, she spotted the cavalry column, not pursuing her but advancing steadily along the false trail she'd provided. Harrington had made his choice. The hunt for gold outweighed the search for one troublesome woman. By midday, she reached the hidden valley where the tribe had agreed to regroup. Instead of the expected camp, she found signs of hasty departure and something more alarming, blood on the stones. Signs of combat. They were betrayed again, she murmured to her exhausted mount, a sound behind her, the soft scrape of leather on stone. She whirled, brandishing her only weapon, a small knife she'd stolen from the cavalry camp. "Your skills improve." "Sarah Bennett!" Red Wolf stepped from the shadows. His face grim, but his eyes warming at the sight of her. Relief flooded through her. "You're alive." "The others?" "Safe for now." He approached slowly, as if uncertain of his welcome. "You escaped the bluecoats." "They're following the false trail, but not for long." She dismounted, legs unsteady, after hours of hard riding. "It's worse than we thought. They've discovered gold in these mountains. This isn't just a punitive expedition. They want to drive your people out permanently." Red Wolf's expression hardened. "This we suspected. Black Knife learned as much from his contacts. The implication was clear. Black Knife is the traitor? Was. His voice held a finality that required no elaboration. He believed an alliance with the white world would save our people. He was wrong. Sarah absorbed this revelation. Where are the others? Higher in the mountains. We must join them before the distant crack of rifles interrupted him. Cavalry scouts had found them. Run! Red Wolf grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a narrow ravine. They fled through the rocky terrain as bullets kicked up dust around them. Sarah's stolen horse bolted, disappearing into the brush. Behind them, shouted commands indicated the scouts had called for reinforcements. The main column couldn't be far behind. The ravine opened onto a plateau where a small group of Apache warriors waited with horses. Red Wolf barked commands, helping Sarah mount behind Swift Deer before swinging onto his own stallion. Ride for the high camp, he ordered. I will delay them. No, Sarah protested. There are too many. The look he gave her held too many emotions to name. Go, live, tell our story. Before she could argue, the warriors thundered away, carrying her with them. She twisted to look back, watching Red Wolf and 3 others take defensive positions among the rocks. Swift Deer followed her gaze. He fights for all of us now, not just vengeance. They rode hard for an hour before the sounds of battle reached them. Rifle fire, war cries, the distant boom of a cannon. The cavalry had committed their full force. Sarah couldn't stand it. We have to go back. Swift Deer shook his head. Red Wolf's orders? I don't care. She slid from the horse. Give me a weapon. After a moment's hesitation, he handed her a knife and a cavalry saber they'd taken in a previous skirmish. You ride like Apache now. Perhaps you fight like one too. They returned to find chaos. The cavalry had split their forces, some pursuing the fleeing tribe, while others engaged Red Wolf's warriors. Bodies littered the ground, blue uniforms and Apache fighters alike. Sarah spotted Red Wolf locked in combat with Captain Harrington, who wielded a saber with practiced skill. Even as she watched, the captain's blade sliced across Red Wolf's arm, drawing blood. Without conscious thought, Sarah urged her mount forward, the stolen cavalry saber raised. She intercepted Harrington's next strike with a clang of steel. The impact nearly unseated her, but she held firm. Miss Bennett. Harrington's shock quickly turned to rage. So it's true. You've gone native. I've found my place, she corrected, circling warily. Behind her, Red Wolf clutched his bleeding arm, eyes wide with surprise at her return. Harrington attacked with military precision. Sarah parried clumsily but effectively. Her weeks of hard labor among the Apache having built strength she'd never possessed before. When their blades locked, Harrington leaned close. Your father would be ashamed. My father was wrong, she gritted out, and so are you. With a twist she'd seen Red Wolf use in practice, Sarah broke the blade lock and struck. The saber caught Harrington across the chest. Not a killing blow, but enough to send him staggering back. As he recovered, a shot rang out. Langley appeared from the chaos, rifle raised. Traitorous bitch. Sarah didn't feel the bullet hit. Only a sudden, strange warmth spreading across her side. Her saber snapped against stone as she fell. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Red Wolf catching her, his face transformed by fear and something deeper that might have been love. Sarah floated through darkness, voices drifting around her like smoke. Dove's soft chanting, Swift Deer's concerned murmurs. Red Wolf's commands, tight with barely controlled emotion. Pain dragged her back to consciousness, sharp, insistent throbbing in her side. She opened her eyes to find herself in an unfamiliar cave, illuminated by firelight. Dove bent over her, applying a poultice to the wound in her side. You returned to us, the older woman observed. Good. The chief has not slept while you danced with the spirits. Sarah tried to speak, found her throat parched. After sipping water from a skinned dove held to her lips, she managed to ask, how long? 2 days, 2 days lost. The soldiers? They search the mountains still. Dove adjusted the bandage. But they argue among themselves. Their leader with the beard was wounded by your hand. The one who shot you is dead. Langley. Sarah felt no grief for the man, only relief that one threat had been eliminated, and our people. The words slipped out naturally now. Our people, not your people. Dove's weathered face softened. Safe in the high places. The bluecoats cannot reach them with their big guns there. A standoff then. But for how long? Red Wolf entered the cave, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. When he saw Sarah conscious, something like prayer whispered from his lips. "You should not have returned," he said, crouching beside her. "But I am grateful you did." She tried to smile. 11 nights remain. I keep my bargains. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with unexpected gentleness. "You have more than fulfilled any debt between us." Dove discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone beside the fire. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, wincing as pain flared with each breath. "The soldiers have split their forces. Half pursue our people in the mountains. The others maintain camp in the valley, treating their wounded." His expression darkened. "They have sent for reinforcements. Because of the gold." She squeezed his hand. "They won't stop, Red Wolf. Not while they believe there's wealth to be claimed. Then we must make it too costly for them to continue." His voice hardened. "We can harry their forces, cut their supply lines, and they will send more soldiers, and more after that." Sarah struggled to sit up despite the pain. "There's another way." From around her neck she withdrew a leather cord. Hanging from it was a heavy gold ring bearing the Bennett family crest, the one possession she'd kept hidden even from Red Wolf until now. "My father's signet," she explained, "the symbol of his authority and lineage." Red Wolf regarded the ring with wary confusion. "How does this help us?" "Captain Harrington knew my father, respected him." She held the ring in her palm, its weight representing generations of Bennett history. "And my father's name carries influence with territorial officials. If I confront them directly as William Bennett's daughter, they might listen." "To what?" "The truth." Her eyes met his. "That they are violating legal treaties. That their actions are driven by greed, not justice. That the gold they seek comes with a price in blood they should not be willing to pay." He studied her face. "You would stand against your own people? Your father's legacy?" "I choose which legacy to honor," she said quietly. "The best of my father, his determination, his courage, not his cruelty or prejudice." Her fingers closed around the ring. "And I choose which people to call my own." The unspoken meaning hung between them, as tangible as the gold in her palm. Red Wolf's expression softened. "You risk much, as do you every day." She held his gaze. "Help me to my feet. The time for hiding is past." Dawn found them approaching the cavalry camp under a flag of truce. Sarah rode beside Red Wolf, her wound bound tightly, determination masking her pain. 6 Apache warriors accompanied them, proud and unbowed. Captain Harrington met them at the perimeter, his chest bandaged where Sarah's saber had struck him. Behind him stood a man in civilian clothes, the territorial governor's representative, summoned to witness the military triumph. Miss Bennett. Harrington's surprise was evident. "We thought you dead or worse." "I am very much alive, Captain." She straightened despite the fire in her side. "And I bring terms." "Terms?" He laughed incredulously. "You are in no position—" "I am William Bennett's daughter and sole heir," she interrupted, holding up the signet ring. "My father's investments fund half the territorial operations, including this military campaign. These men," she indicated the Apache beside her, "are not savages to be exterminated, but legal occupants of land protected by treaty." The governor's man stepped forward, interest piqued. "Miss Bennett?" "Alexander Holbrook, Territorial Secretary. Your father's reputation is well known, as is his wealth and influence," Sarah replied coolly. "Influence I now control, and will use to bring scrutiny to this illegal action unless we reach an agreement today." Harrington bristled, but Holbrook raised a hand to silence him. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "We discuss it here, with all parties present." Sarah met Red Wolf's eyes briefly before continuing. "The gold in these mountains has blinded you to both law and honor. I propose a solution that serves all interests. She laid out her terms, a new treaty establishing clear boundaries for Apache territory with negotiated rights for limited mining operations that would benefit both settlers and the tribe. Mutual defense agreements, recognition of Red Wolf's leadership, and financial penalties backed by the Bennett fortune for any violations. When she finished, silence fell over the gathering. Harrington's face had darkened with rage, but Holbrook appeared calculating. "Your father would never have supported such terms," the captain finally said. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "My father is dead. I'm not bound by his mistakes." The negotiations lasted hours. By sunset, an uneasy agreement had been reached. Not perfect, but a beginning. A middle ground neither side had believed possible. As they prepared to depart, Red Wolf touched Sarah's arm. "The 30th night approaches," he said quietly. "Tomorrow our bargain ends," her heart stuttered. And then his eyes held hers, no longer those of captor or enemy, but of a man seeing his equal. "And then we begin anew, if you wish it." In that moment, Sarah knew with certainty the middle ground they had found was not just between two peoples, but between two hearts that had journeyed from vengeance to something far more precious. The 30th day dawned clear and cool. Sarah stood at the edge of the Apache camp, watching the sun rise over mountains now secured, at least temporarily, by the treaty she had helped negotiate. Her side still ached where Langley's bullet had grazed her, but the wound was healing cleanly, thanks to Dove's care. The tribe had returned from their mountain refuge, rebuilding what had been disrupted by the cavalry's incursion. Children once again played among the dwellings. Women worked at their daily tasks. Warriors maintained vigilant patrols, but the immediate threat had passed. "The last day," Swift Deer observed, joining her on the ridge. "Your bargain with Red Wolf is complete with tonight's sunset." Sarah nodded, her thoughts turning to the man who had claimed her life, and in doing so, had given her a new one. "Where is he?" "Council fire." The elders discussed the treaty. Swift Deer studied her face. "You negotiated well. Few white women would have stood before warriors and soldiers with such courage. Few white women have seen both worlds as I have." She touched the horsehair bracelet still circling her wrist. "Or found value in both." Swift Deer nodded thoughtfully. "Red Wolf speaks of establishing a trading post at the boundary between our lands and the settlements, a place where fair exchange might happen." He glanced at her. "Such a place would need those who understand both peoples." The suggestion was clear, offering a glimpse of possible future. Before Sarah could respond, Sparrow approached with her young son. "The children ask for more English lessons," she said, smiling. "They say your words are strange, but good to know." "I'll come soon," Sarah promised. As Sparrow departed, Dove emerged from her dwelling, beckoning Sarah inside. The older woman had become something of a mentor during Sarah's time with the tribe, her initial suspicion gradually replaced by gruff affection. "Sit," Dove instructed, gesturing to a mat. When Sarah complied, she placed something in her palm, a pendant of polished turquoise set in silver, hanging from a leather cord. "This is beautiful," Sarah said, admiring the craftsmanship. "My husband's work." Dove's weathered fingers traced the design. "Silver from white traders, turquoise from our sacred mountains. Two worlds in one piece." Her eyes met Sarah's. "Like you now." Sarah felt unexpected tears threaten. "I'm not sure where I belong anymore." "The heart knows." Dove secured the pendant around Sarah's neck. When treaty talks ended, Red Wolf spoke to the elders. "He asked permission to keep you among us, not as captive or guest, but as one of our people. If that is your wish," the revelation stole Sarah's breath. "What did they say?" "They have watched you bleed for us, fight for us. Use your father's name to protect us." Dove's expression softened. "The women say yes. The warriors say yes. Even those who doubted you now speak your name with respect." Hope bloomed in Sarah's chest, tentative, fragile, but real. "And what do you say, Dove?" The older woman smiled, rare and genuine. "I say you make our war chief smile again after many years of darkness. This alone is gift enough." As sunset approached, Sarah found Red Wolf at the place where they had first discussed the possibility of a middle ground. He stood watching the valley, his profile strong against the reddening sky. 30 days, she said softly, joining him. My debt is paid. He turned, his eyes taking in the turquoise pendant at her throat. You wear Dove's gift. A symbol of two worlds joined. Her fingers touched the smooth stone. She told me what you asked the elders. Something like vulnerability flickered across his face. It was presumptuous, perhaps. No. Sarah moved closer. It was hopeful. The word hung between them, delicate and powerful. Red Wolf reached out, his fingers brushing hers. When I claimed you, he said quietly, it was for vengeance. Your father took everything from me. I would take what was precious to him. I understand now, but I did not understand then what claiming you would mean. His voice deepened. How it would change me, how you would become. He paused, searching for words. Not a symbol of the past, but a promise for the future. Sarah closed the distance between them, her hand finding his. Is that what I am to you? A promise? You are sunrise after longest night. The simple poetry of his words touched her deeply. You are water in desert, path where there was none. The sun dipped below the horizon, marking the end of the 30th day. Their bargain was complete. No obligation bound them now, only choice. The trading post Swift Deer mentioned, Sarah said. A place between worlds. It would need someone who understands both sides. Hope kindled in his eyes. Someone like you. Someone like us, she corrected gently. If that is what you want. Red Wolf's hand came up to touch the pendant at her throat, then lifted to cup her cheek. What I want, he said softly, is no longer vengeance or the past. What I want stands before me. As the first stars appeared above them, Sarah Bennett, daughter of William, once captive, now something else entirely, made her choice. She rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to Red Wolf's. In that kiss lay forgiveness. For the past, gratitude for the present, and hope for a future neither could have imagined 30 days before, when an Apache war chief claimed a white woman's life and unwittingly set them both free. 1 year later, the trading post stood at the boundary where Apache territory met the route to Promise Creek. Simple but sturdy, it featured a central building for commerce, a corral for horses, and 2 dwellings, one traditional Apache structure and one cabin built in the white settlers' style. Sarah arranged goods on rough-hewn shelves, coffee, sugar, and tools traded from settlers, beautifully tanned hides, woven baskets, and turquoise jewelry from the tribe. The trading post had become exactly what she and Red Wolf had envisioned, a place where 2 worlds met in fair exchange. Outside, voices raised in greeting. Through the doorway, Sarah watched Red Wolf welcome a small hunting party returning from the mountains. He carried himself differently now, still a war chief when necessary, but also a bridge between peoples, a builder rather than a destroyer. The past year had brought changes neither could have predicted. The treaty had held, though not without challenges. Twice, gold seekers had encroached on Apache lands. Twice, Sarah had used her father's name and connections to enforce boundaries. Captain Harrington had been reassigned to a desk position after his wound, and his failure to secure the gold fields had made him a liability. Most significantly, the territorial governor had recognized Red Wolf as the official Apache representative for negotiations, giving the tribe a voice they had never before possessed in white politics. The supply wagon approaches, Red Wolf announced, entering the trading post. Swift Deer spotted it crossing the valley. Sarah smiled. Right on schedule. Martha Pierce keeps her word. The widow Pierce had become their most reliable trader, bringing goods from as far as Tucson. Unlike many settlers, she dealt fairly with both the post and the Apache who came to trade. Red Wolf moved behind the counter, his hand finding the small of Sarah's back in a gesture that had become familiar and cherished. The hunting party brings news. A new cavalry commander arrives next week. They say he seeks peaceful relations. We'll see. Experience had taught Sarah caution. But we'll welcome him properly, show him what we've built here. His eyes softened as they always did when she said we. The wounds of the past had not disappeared, but they had scarred over, becoming part of their shared story rather than a barrier between them. The ceremony that had joined them had combined traditions, Apache vows of loyalty and protection, a reading from her father's Bible, the exchange of gifts that symbolized their commitment. Not everyone had approved. Some settlers still whispered about the white woman who went native. Some Apache still viewed their union with uncertainty. But here, in the space they had created together, those voices faded to insignificance. "Dove asks when you will return to finish your basket," Red Wolf said, examining a newly arrived knife with expert eyes. "She says your weaving has improved, but your patience has not." Sarah laughed. "Tell her I'll come tomorrow. My latest attempt might actually hold water this time." Their easy conversation paused as Sarah felt a now familiar flutter beneath her ribs. Her hand moved instinctively to her growing belly, rounded with 6 months of new life. Red Wolf noticed the gesture and crossed to her side, his palm joining hers over their unborn child. "The little one is strong today, like his father, or stubborn like his mother." The cradle board waited in their dwelling, a project they had worked on together during the winter evenings. Red Wolf had carved the frame with traditional Apache symbols of protection and strength. Sarah had added elements from her heritage, a small cross, a delicately etched rose like those in her mother's garden. Their child would be born into a world still filled with divisions and prejudice, but also into a family that had found strength in difference, healing in forgiveness. A rider appeared on the trail, the advance scout for the supply wagon. Sarah moved to prepare for their visitors, but Red Wolf caught her hand, drawing her back for a moment. "I have been thinking," he said, his voice lowered for her ears alone. "About the 30 nights," Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That was long ago." "Yes." His fingers traced the silver and turquoise pendant she still wore daily. "But I realize now, I never properly finished our bargain." "How so?" "I served my 30 nights. A rare, mischievous smile touched his lips. "I claimed 30 nights, but I never specified which 30. Understanding dawned. "So you're saying—" "I choose these nights," he murmured, his forehead touching hers, "and all those that follow." Sarah's heart swelled with an emotion that had grown from the seeds of hostility into something profound and enduring. What had begun as a bargain for survival had blossomed into a love that defied boundaries of culture and history. "Then I accept your claim," she whispered against his lips. "For these 30 nights and 30 years more." Outside, the world continued its cautious progress toward understanding. Within, they had already found what others still sought, the precious middle ground where differences strengthened rather than divided, where the burdens of the past gave way to the promise of the future. A future symbolized by the child who would soon join them, carrying forward the best of both worlds that had collided in the Arizona Territory when an Apache war chief claimed a white woman for 30 nights and found forever instead. And so, we come to the end of Sarah and Red Wolf's story, a tale that began with a desperate theft and a bargain made in fear, only to transform into something neither could have imagined on that fateful night in the Arizona Territory. Their trading post flourished in the years that followed, becoming more than just a place of commerce. It grew into a sanctuary where Apache and settler alike could find fair treatment, honest exchange, and perhaps most importantly, a living example of what was possible when prejudice gave way to understanding. Their son, born strong and healthy in the winter of 1874, was named Thomas William in honor of Sarah's late husband and her father, acknowledging the past while building a new future. He was joined 2 years later by a daughter, Morning Sky, whose quick intelligence and diplomatic instincts would eventually make her an even more effective bridge between worlds than her parents. The leather-bound journal where Sarah recorded their story was passed down through generations, treasured by descendants who carried both Apache and European blood in their veins. Her words preserved not just what happened, but the heart of what it meant. How two people from opposing worlds found in each other not an enemy, but a completion. Red Wolf claimed my life for 30 nights, she wrote in the final entry of her journal. But in doing so, he gave me a new one that has lasted 30 years and counting. What began as punishment became my greatest blessing. The middle ground we sought was not just between our peoples, but within our hearts. What happened to them? History tells us that the treaty they helped forge held for nearly a decade, an eternity in the tumultuous Arizona territory of the late 1800s. The gold mines were eventually developed, but with Apache participation and fair compensation rather than exploitation and bloodshed. Their trading post became the seed of a small settlement where mixed families could find acceptance. Though both Sarah and Red Wolf faced criticism and sometimes outright hostility from extremists on both sides, they remained steadfast in their belief that understanding could triumph over hatred. Red Wolf continued as war chief until their son reached manhood, then stepped aside to focus on diplomatic relations with the territorial government. Sarah's command of both languages and cultures made her an invaluable negotiator during times of tension. They were not perfect. They argued, they struggled, they sometimes doubted the path they had chosen. But at the end of each day, they returned to the middle ground they had created together, a place where differences strengthened rather than divided. Their story reminds us that even in the most polarized times, individual hearts can find their way to understanding, that vengeance can give way to forgiveness, that what begins as 30 nights of obligation can become a lifetime of choice. I'd love to know which part of Sarah and Red Wolf's journey resonated most with you. Was it the moment she chose to stay rather than return with the cavalry? Perhaps when Red Wolf revealed his true motivation for claiming her? Or maybe their final realization that what began as punishment had become a precious gift. Drop me a comment and let me know where you're watching from and which artifact from their story spoke to you most deeply. Was it the ceremonial blanket that marked her as his? The broken mortar and pestle that symbolized their fractured trust? Or perhaps the cradle board that represented their shared future? If this story touched your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Another tale of unlikely love that defied the boundaries of its time. I'll be sharing the remarkable true story of a Union nurse and a Confederate officer who found healing in each other during our nation's darkest hour. Until then, remember that the most beautiful relationships often begin in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes, like Sarah, we must lose everything we thought we wanted to find what our hearts truly need. And sometimes, like Red Wolf, we must be willing to let go of the past to embrace the future that stands before us. Thank you for joining me for Apache Paid for Her Life and Said, 30 Nights You're Mine. I'll see you tomorrow for another journey into history's forgotten love stories.